To be sure, it really is Dulux Weather Shield Magnolia Smooth Masonry Paint, and not that horrible whitewash. You can ring this number now, 0753 550 555. That's 0753 550 555. As for Patrick and his blotched wall, well, you'll be pleased to know that ICI have apologised and agreed to make good all the damage that the fake paint caused. As to who's responsible and why they've done it, well, neither we, nor ICI, nor indeed Digby here are any the wiser. Perhaps you have a clue. If so, give us a call.
Now, take a look at these. Earlier this year, we told you how some Watchdog viewers had been conned out of thousands of pounds by fraudsters selling these kind of gems to the UK from the continent. Since then, more victims have emerged, with evidence of an even more spectacular scam. Simon Walton reports.
It isn't just the alluring twinkle that makes them so attractive. For many, it's the promise that in turbulent times, precious stones will keep their value as an investment. That's how Catherine Q was persuaded to part with her life savings of £45,000. Christopher Davey spent £25,000. They bought their gems from the now-defunct Royal Antwerp Group, and both have lived to regret the day the company first called them.
The people at the Royal Antwerp Group said they were gem brokers, and I asked them, I said, look, I know nothing about gemstones. I'm going to trust you the way I trusted my stockbroker for shares. Oh, yes, absolutely. And I did. They even said they would, I should mortgage my house, sell all my shares, and they would guarantee that this would come back. They said they would guarantee it would come back.
Having spent £25,000 on them and learnt that the Royal Antwerp Group had gone down, the first thing I did was to go to a jeweller in Bath and try and get them valued.
He was in for a shock. His 6 gemstones, which cost him £25,000, seem impressive enough in their official-looking mountings. So do Catherine's ruby, sapphires and emerald, for which she paid £45,000. But how much are their collections really worth? We took the stones to an expert valuer for his verdict.
Well, these gems of Catherine's here are very ordinary quality. They're probably less than commercial quality, and their whole value at a realisable price is probably about £2,600. And these of Major Davies are probably even poorer quality, and I would value those in the region of about £1,500.
Needless to say, my heart sank at this news.
So instead of keeping my money in nice, safe British shares, I'm now having to look at my pension to keep me alive.
But there were more surprises to come. The Royal Antwerp Group may have folded, but its customer list lives on, and it's found its way into the hands of a fresh set of fraudsters with an even more devious trick up their sleeves. The unscrupulous gem dealers have come up with a new strategy to part you from your money. It's called the resale deal. They offer you not only the chance to recoup your losses, but to make a huge profit on top. But there is a catch. This is how it works. You have a collection of gems called a portfolio, and the dealer promises you a buyer for that portfolio. But it turns out that you just happen to lack one crucial gem to complete a set. And guess what? The dealer can provide that gem for you. You buy it, make up the set, and then the whole lot goes on to this mystery client, and you make a killing. Sounds like just the answer, and having been lumbered with poor value gems by Royal Antwerp, Catherine and Christopher soon found themselves on the receiving end of this new racket.
The next stage was the phone call from Manila saying that they had got what they called my liquidation portfolio. In other words, they were the good guys who had picked up this portfolio that the bad guys, the Royal Antwerp Group, had sold me, and they were going to get my money back for me.
I received a phone call from Divine Jewels, who said they could sell my portfolio so long as I was able to let them top up with 2 rubies. They would sell it to a client in London for $80,000 odd. All I had to do was to send them something like $3,000 for these other two jewels, and then sit on my hands until the end of the month.
Catherine wasn't tempted. She had no money left anyway. But Christopher took up his offer from a company called Divine Jewels. He bought two top-up gems, a ruby and a sapphire. He paid nearly $4,000. That's over £2,600.
I sat back for the close of deal date. I called Divine Jewels the day after, and they were not answering their phone. And I suddenly realized that I had been suckered again.
The scam was complete. Divine Jewels had Christopher's money, but surprise, surprise, the mystery buyer he'd been promised never turned up. So what are his top-up jewels actually worth?
These two stones, rather interesting, totally different. The ruby is quite reasonable quality, and I would estimate a value for that for about £400. But the sapphire, absolutely useless. It's so poor quality that it's probably not even worth the box it's packaged in.
Divine Jewels were based here in Toronto in Canada. The shop's now deserted. Toronto itself has earned the reputation as the gemstone swindle capital of the world. Every month, Toronto detectives deal with hundreds of complaints from across the globe.
We have a list of over now 160 different companies that are operating or have operated in Metro. On any given day, there's about 30. They'll run for a certain period of time, then fold their tents, move on, start under a new name.
What should people do if they get calls from Toronto gem dealers?
First, don't believe a word they're saying. I've never heard of anybody liquidating their portfolio to their advantage. Never, ever have I heard of anyone who sold their gems at a profit to themselves. Don't go for it.
Somebody has got to do something about it. It's worldwide. And there are far too many other people, especially in this country, that are going to be getting phone calls from these people. And they must on no account part with anything. It's going to be difficult. I was tempted. Very tempting indeed.
And someone who wishes he'd never been tempted is Christopher Davey.
I have had a lot of cold calling from double glazing salesmen and so on, but these boys are in a league all their own. They are very convincing.
And let me make it absolutely plain. All the companies dealing in those not-so-precious stones operated from abroad and should not be confused with companies of similar names based here in the UK. In the meantime, the advice to anyone contacted by companies like these is simple. Put the phone down. Some of your calls to us in just a minute, but first a programme stocking filler sent to us by Mike Drury and his chums who work for Lothian Trading Standards up in Edinburgh. It's these Thunderbirds chocolates. Well, at least they look like Thunderbirds chocolates, but Alice, what is actually inside, for example, the one that has a Thunderbirds rocket on the wrapper?
It's a garden gnome.
Right, yeah.
Gnomes are go don't quite have the same ring somehow. What about the one that has a penguin on the wrapper?
Well, I'm afraid it's another garden gnome.
We're not doing very well, are we? What about the one that has a clown on the wrapper?
Okay.
Don't tell me.
A garden gnome.
It's a garden. Now, if it's not a stupid question, how come Meltis, who describe themselves as purveyors of traditional quality confectionery for over 80 years, how do they account for this?
Well, Paul Muster, who's in charge of customer relations at Meltis, was disarmingly frank. He said they have only got the one mould. In his words, children will just have to use their imagination.
But just so that children know precisely, no matter what they buy, Thunderbirds, gnomes, clowns, whatever, you're going to get a gnome, kids. Right, what else are people calling about, Alice?
Well, we've had a cautionary tale for anyone tempted to make personal calls from the office telephone. David Gallagher from Stockport was just leaving work one Friday night when he couldn't resist calling the William Hill race line to see if his horse had won. It's an 0891 number giving a recording of all racing events. When he returned to work on Monday morning, David picked up the receiver to make a call, and on the line came the William Hill race line. David had left the phone off the hook all weekend. When his boss got the bill, it came to a staggering £1,100.
Has David still got a job?
He has. He's got a very sympathetic boss, and he's got to pay the bill, but he's still got a job.
Right, well, he's a lucky man. What happened to the horse, by the way?
It came last.
It came last. You may remember the call we had the other week about a poor lady who'd found herself billed for £2,000 for a takeaway curry because of a credit card mistake. Well, we had another call from Christopher Spalding, this one in Norwich, who had an equally shocking experience when he looked at his bank statement and discovered that a bunch of flowers sent by Interflora to America for a friend's anniversary had cost him the princely sum of £37,023.70. We can't say often enough, check your bills. Lots and lots of calls about plumbers. One lady saying she was charged £363 to unblock a loo. The treasurer of a church in East London saying he was charged £182 for a job that other plumbers said should not have cost more than £75. But the great news, Nigel Havers, the actor, has rung in, appalled by what he saw in Lynn's film, is sending Jenny Graham a cheque for £300 tomorrow so that she and her kids can have a terrific Christmas. Nigel, you're a gentleman. Thanks very much indeed. Lynn.
And that's it for this week. Remember, our lines are open 24 hours a day, either answered by us or by machines on which you can leave a message. Until the same time next week, good night.
Good night.